and welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching The Week in Review. I'm your host, Ade Darami, and my co-host is Mr. Mamadou Mboj. Mr. Mboj, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ade.
And for anybody who's watching this show for the very first time, this is how it goes. We take 10 of the big stories from the week just past and we go through them in some detail. We'll watch a video and then we'll kick the stories around and analyze them a bit more. We've got things like His Excellency the President registering to vote. We've got ECOWAS voting on Mali. We've got a bit of a small diplomatic spat between the Gambia and Senegal at ECOWAS. That one I'm sure you'll enjoy. Anyway, enough of me talking about it. Let's get cracking. And so the first story is actually, in case you don't know, this is going to be a very big year in the Gambia. Why? Because it's election year. And in order to both contest and also vote, you have to register. And so His Excellency the President queued up and registered. And he also had some words to say. Have a look.
I have just registered. I think this is a very important exercise for every Gambian to come forward and register. If you are registered, you can be part of the process to select or elect your representatives at every level. President, National Assembly, councillors, chairmen, mayors, at every level. You will be part of the process to elect your representative. So it's key and it's important for every Gambian to come out in their large numbers to register.
Important for every Gambian to come out in their large numbers to register. Mr. Mboj, I think the other day I was asking you, I won't ask you again whether you've registered, the process has just started, but the message there from His Excellency actually telling people to come out in large numbers. Why is that important, that he makes that particular message?
Because really, traditionally, you don't have high numbers really going to vote. You know, we do a lot of talking, but you don't have high numbers, particularly now with the youth. Yeah. I think there has been a lot of talk about so far what they're seeing in the centres. Sure. I think there are about 730-something centres around the country. They've not been seeing that many high number of youth going out. But this is just the beginning, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's 44 days from beginning to end. Yeah.
So possibly now you will just have a trickle in, people are trickling in and that sort of thing. And perhaps when evenly spread, we understand that they're expecting about a million.
Yeah, yes.
A million eligible voters to register and stuff like that. So perhaps when evenly spread, we might not get to register. Yeah. But it doesn't work like that, really. Particularly, 2016, the elections that we had here, we had more than 50% turnout, fine. Right. Turnout ratio, fine. But again, afterwards, come to the National Assembly, the number just went down. So would it pick up? We didn't know, particularly with the youth.
Well, indeed. I mean, and the reason I kind of wanted this story, and particularly what the President had to say, was because I'm one of those who's been quite surprised. Because for people outside of the Gambia, you think, they thought elections of the past were a foregone conclusion. And so many people might not have registered, apart from 2016, where, as you said, it was more than 50%. Now that there's not the kind of ogre, the bogeyman around, people assumed that people would really want to get into the kind of democratic process. But the only sign we've seen of that is the explosion in the number of political parties, but not necessarily in the number of sort of people registering to vote. Why do you think that is? Because I'm a bit perplexed by it.
Absolutely, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because yes, a lot of people think that they stand a chance.
And
anybody with a half decent sort of experience or education will think that you can run, especially when you look at Barrow and perhaps looking at him in a patronizing way, thinking, well, look at him, he's not educated, but look at him, he's there. And when you look at these examples, you think that you can do it. So you have that proliferation of parties.
I know, I get that, where people kind of patronize them and think, I could do better than that. But it's not the job is not as easy as it seems.
At all. But again, with ordinary people, I'm not sure whether we've been particularly politicized by anything.
Right.
I mean, and given the cynicism we have with politicians, and we see them as corrupt, so perhaps a lot of people wouldn't think that their votes would make any difference at all.
And is that at the core of it, that you know, one of the things that the Gambia has been criticized for is that politicians traditionally have not gone out to argue about ideas to get the vote. Let's be blunt, they've used tribal affiliations and that sort of thing. Is that part of the problem?
Absolutely. I mean, how do you distinguish one party from the other? I mean, perhaps the only one with a kind of distinctive character, we might call it perhaps PD or with socialism, with their cooperative economics. When they talk to you, you can at least tease out ideas from what they say. But every other party, what do you get? Development, we will improve
I'm going to make things better.
I'm going to make things better. All these abstractions, these generalities, then you never get anything concrete. So there's a terrible lack of ideas.
Sure.
At the very heart of politics in many ways.
And so the call from His Excellency the President, as you say, you know, I've got no axe to grind here, you know, as I say, I've got no dog in this fight. But I would like to see young people, because they're very active on social media. And I think that's the danger. People think the sort of activism on social media will translate into votes. But if we're not seeing them register to vote, then it's just, you know, they're just being keyboard warriors.
Absolutely, yes. It doesn't work like that. So this media presence, I mean, the whole airwaves sort of saturated with one program or another on youth and that sort of thing. Exactly. So now, how do you translate that into citizenship?
Yeah, quite.
Active citizenship. That should be really the goal of political parties in many ways, because youth is the biggest segment, the largest segment of the population. Sure. I mean, can you imagine the potential in that electoral, you know, where you can turn it to electoral advantage? Sure. So that is really their challenge. And perhaps it is a matter of how you talk to them. It is not just simply to condemn and express outrage over their apathy and that sort of thing. It's just how you talk to them.
How do you engage?
How do you engage them? I mean, you see, the youth must understand that if they want their rights, obviously, when you demand your rights on the one hand, then you have to discharge your responsibilities on the other. This is the first rule of citizenship, really. And they have to recognize perhaps their historical role. I mean, Africa is the youngest continent, but we've got geriatrics ruling us. It's a remarkable paradox here, absolutely. So perhaps the youth, the second coming, something happened at independence, but now we understand now certain things that a second coming must really take place, and this must be by the youth. That political consciousness, you know what I mean? To understand that rights go with responsibilities to form a citizenship, and create what we call commitment devices.
And it's a tough balancing act, because in Uganda you had people like Bobby Wine, who, in fact, his youth was what they used against him, saying, you know, you're too young to lead, when you had a geriatric in office who's been there 36 years already.
But this is it. These are some of the social pressures. These are just some of the challenges that we face to modernize, to move our societies forward. It's going to be a hard battle. It's a battle for hearts and minds.
There you are, battle for hearts and minds. And, you know, as His Excellency the President said, go out and vote in large numbers. I told one of my colleagues in the office, I said, if you don't vote and I hear you complain about the results of the election, I'll never speak to you again. So there's a threat. But anyway, Mr. Mboj, on to our next story. And this one is quite a somber one. A young Gambian who was expecting great things, was living in France. He'd gone through the back way, but things were seemingly changing for the better for him. And then, unfortunately, this happened. Have a look.
We also need all the support for his dead body to be repatriated back home and be given a fitting burial.
According to reports in France, the Saint-Étienne prosecutor's office requested a warrant of arrest against 3 men aged 28, 32 and 62.
As I mentioned there, obviously we have no interest in showing quite graphic pictures, and the only fortunate thing about this is that it's been captured on CCTV and on mobile phone footage, and so 3 arrests have been made. But Mr. Mboj, it seemed to be a completely unprovoked attack. I mean, 3 people have been arrested, but at one point about 6 people were attacking this one guy. Your thoughts on this?
Absolutely gruesome stuff from what I hear. Really gruesome stuff. Yes, and it seemed unprovoked. I understand that the 3 men arrested are Armenians,
yes,
including father and son.
And son, yeah.
So it will be interesting to see after the investigations what emerges, because there's so much we do not know. But
there's a lot we don't know.
So nasty, so graphically, really disturbing.
Sure. I mean, I said we didn't show some of the stuff. Because you could see one of them stabs him in the back, and another stabs, I think the same person stabs him in the stomach. I mean, I'm not encouraging people to go out and look for the images, and I myself, I can honestly say I only watched it because we were going to do a news piece on it, which this clip is from. But from what has emerged in France, from the police and so on, it seems unprovoked. It seems fairly ridiculous, because apparently he knew, or one of the men, one of his attackers, and he made an innocent remark to him in jest, and the whole thing spiraled out of control.
Absolutely, the savagery of it, yes, that's it, from apparently innocuous question, do you have cold?
Do you have a cold?
Do you have a cold? Yeah. So perhaps there's a lot we haven't got, we do not know yet, and it will come out. Is there any racial element to it?
Well, that was one of the things I was going to
so we do not know yet.
Because Saint Etienne is a fairly cosmopolitan place, quite mixed, and you have people from virtually every nation under the sun living there, and most of it sort of harmoniously, relatively. But it's a plea there from the family. They're hoping to repatriate his body, because it's one of these things, somebody dies there, and it's almost obscene for them to be buried there because of the nasty and brutal way in which they were killed. And your thoughts on that, I wouldn't want a relative of mine who'd been killed in that way to be buried in that country, frankly.
Yes, one understands that. I mean, one can understand the sentimentality of it. I understand the sentiment when that happens. But again, I should be careful. Apparently here you had sort of Armenians, not French, and they have been arrested. It seems that the wheels of justice are rolling as they should.
Indeed, yes.
So far not Frenchmen. Even if they were Frenchmen, still, you know what I mean, we should be careful how we judge this.
Yes.
And I hope some wouldn't take it in the context of the Black Lives Matter, that sort of thing. Here, there is no suggestion that it was the state that did it.
I was going to go there, because
Exactly.
what I was about to say is that there is a temptation that because, Armenians, sort of Caucasians, and a black man, that they might jump to it, but we don't know the facts, really, do we? I mean, and we should not jump to conclusions.
Yes, and so far there is no suggestion that you've got state agents, which is crucial, which is key. State agents doing this and getting away with it and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it seems you've got citizens or people living in the country, which you have all the time. There are murders, in France, regularly, really. So let's sort of suspend judgment and try to look at the facts, and of course help the family in whichever way one can. I think that's the thing to do.
Thanks for that. And as Mr. Mboch says there, our thoughts and our condolences, obviously, to the family, and we hope that justice will be done in this particular case. Thank you for that. And now on to another serious matter. Here in the Gambia, I saw one opposition leader a couple of weeks ago describe the Gambia as a drugs hub. Not sure it's that quite, but it's becoming something of a serious menace. Seizures of drugs, including this lot. Have a look.
And we all know West Coast, there is a porous border with our neighboring country, Senegal. And I urge the general public to come out to give information to this security so that we can fight against this drug.
According to the Drug Law Enforcement Agency authorities, some of these dealers are armed with weapons, while others are spiritually armed, as can be seen in this picture.
I'll try not to laugh at that spiritually armed bit, but that's what the police did say. But they said also more seriously, some of them had guns and some of them had knives. Mr. Mboch, the public have been screaming out for there to be seen to be action taken against all sorts of miscreants, including obviously people selling more than they weren't just selling the odd stick on a corner, were they? I mean, that's like serious amounts of weed there. And your thoughts on this kind of the police, the kind of zero crime, although I think this kind of fell onto that in a specific area, West Coast region.
Yes, absolutely, and one wonders if they have such spiritual, such an arsenal of spiritual tools there, why do they need the earthly stuff? Anyway.
Right, and why did you not stop them getting arrested? But that's another point.
That's another point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been getting these stories, haven't we, now, you know, in the news, whenever they do a seizure, then when we see it. But of course, it's difficult to know how many had actually gone through vis-a-vis what we catch, you know, that we do not know. I'm sure we'll never know. So how do we put this in context? That is the key. So, and let's be honest, I mean, drugs, it's a lucrative business, so people will always go into it. So what is it going to be, government policy? I mean, when you have prohibition, so this is it, every so often you will get your seizure, but many will go through somehow by bribery or whatever. So we expect to see, I do not know, for God knows how long, every so often, periodically, we will come out with these seizures. But how much dent is it making on the whole market? There's a different point.
You do wonder, because I mean, again, when these things happen, we always end up discussing them in public. And somebody said something sort of flippantly in the office. He said probably the reason they got caught is because they didn't bribe the right person this time. You know, others then took up that and that became the discussion, that perhaps, as you said, it's a lucrative business. If you can offer somebody 5, 10 or 20 times their salary just to look the other way, some might be tempted to do it.
Oh, absolutely, and we know that these things work all over the world. To corrupt officials, be it the US, be it anywhere, you do have the big ones, you can have the millions, and you know, you can corrupt any official with it, so that sort of thing. So it's a whole industry, and so many people can potentially benefit. So unless we have a really professional system, you know, where perhaps 99% are sort of incorruptible. You cannot say 100%, because anywhere possibly that doesn't exist.
There'll always be.
There will always be. But again, to have the central thrust of what you do, to be honest and committed, then you can do some interesting inroads. You can have some inroads into some of these apparently intractable things.
And I think the thing that will always defeat us was mentioned there, my favorite phrase, porous border. How can we stop it?
Immediately, I say, why don't you seal it?
You know,
you know what I mean.
It's virtually impossible, because, you know, yes, there are sort of nominally official border posts. There are so many unofficial ones where people literally just walk across.
Absolutely. So you end up relying on people, ordinary people go and report and all of that. That stuff. Let's be realistic, of course. When we talk, everybody will say that, of course, that is a good thing. But how many will actually bother to get up and go and do it? Sort of walking the talk is a problem. Earlier on, we were talking about registers and voting and that sort of thing. A lot of talk, but actually walking the talk, actually doing is not easy.
It's not easy. It's not easy, and as you said, Mr. Mboj, and you know, the police did say at the end of that report, if you'd seen the full news report, they want the public to actually kind of finger these people and say, you know, so and so is involved in illicit drug dealing. But how many people do it? But thanks for that. And now on to another story. This is a kind of he said along the lines of this is the reason why we've banned or we're going to ban night fishing, and somebody else saying, no, it's not, this is the reason why. What am I talking about? Have a look at this.
Instead of the 5-month-long pause suggested by the ministry starting on the 1st of July, the Artisanal Fisheries Association is asking for a 6-month halt to commence in June for the Gambia to observe this break in night fishing at the same time as Senegal, if conservation is the main reason. The Minister of Fisheries, James Gomez, disagrees with the claim that not simultaneously observing a temporary night close with Senegal creates the ground for overfishing, and says his ministry will also be controlling artisanal fisheries.
You see, what is unfortunate that people don't speak the truth. Senegal don't close all Senegal for 6 months. They close different parts of Senegal.
I think the minister there, he was a bit blunt than usual. People don't speak the truth. He could have said they don't have all the facts. But I think he was a bit exasperated. And if anybody watched the whole of that report, the Artisanal Fishermen's Association, whatever they're called, were saying one thing, and he was rebutting it, in the way that I liked Troy doing that, because they had raised several objections, but the truth must be in there somewhere.
Absolutely, yes. It's more about the facts, and I think when he said that, he was referring to the association. He was indeed. Yes, I think he felt that they were intentionally sort of distorting things for whatever. So this is it, quite interesting. So I was trying to digest the arguments here, what was being said. I mean, they both agree on the protection, the ban.
Yes,
but when? Timing.
And to me, it seemed splitting hairs, because we're talking about a month.
Yes.
Only, 5 months or 6 months.
Absolutely. Start in June or start in July? Is it going to be simultaneous with Senegal? As I just said, it's not all over Senegal, maybe some bits of it. So I think the fisheries, the Artisanal Fisheries Association is saying that it's better to do it simultaneously with Senegal. Anyway, that part of Senegal, that's what will start in June. So, and the minister is saying, no, not necessarily so.
Yes. And they're both sides are saying that it's for conservation. I think the minister, the reason he was kind of exasperated and said, people don't speak the truth, was because they were kind of caught on the hop, because the association had gone public and they'd gone on social media, and people had taken up their cause. Oh, look, in Senegal, they're not stopping at the same time. But as he was, clear to point out, it's not the whole of Senegal. There are different areas. He said in Dakar, there's no closure at all, not even for one day.
Being caught on the hop, that has been one of the hallmarks, as it were, of this government. So that is very interesting. One wonders whether, in fact, they had consulted the Artisanal Fisheries Association, in their decisions. But that matters,
it does.
So that you have that ownership of decision. Then when you agree, both of you would respect it. So without that, you're bound to get this tension now, really. So we'll see how this will.
And I think that's a very valid point, because had they consulted, they would have said to them, look, because I suspect the association would have raised their concerns and said, well, look, in Senegal, they're not shutting down at the same time. And the minister could have said, well, actually, it's not the same. In parts of Senegal they are, in other parts they're not. These are the parts. And I think if both sides had understood that, but I suspect, as you rightly say, there might not have been the consultation that was required. There's probably just an edict or a press release from the ministry saying, shutting down night fishing.
But this is really my suspicion here. It will be interesting when one asks the association. Somehow we're used to this sort of government deciding whatever, this top-down, as it were, approach, and people just have to accept it. But again, now under democratic conditions, they have all these associations. They will challenge it.
That's right.
So it is their right to challenge it. So it will be interesting for us, though, perhaps the media, to go into the details to find out what are the relative advantages of whether starting in June or starting in when? July?
Yeah, quite.
One
I think
month.
to the layperson, it's kind of lost on us, like, what's the big deal?
So we have some work to do to understand exactly what's going on.
Indeed. So I think this one will run, and we'll wait and see. I suspect somewhere down the line the ministry and the association probably validated a paper about cooperation, but that seems to have broken down. Anyway, thanks for that, Mr. Mboj. Now on to our next story. This one, we always talk about the brotherly, the fraternal relations between us and Senegal. This time, the Senegalese were not being so brotherly. What am I talking about? Have a look at this clip.
Similar presentations were made by the delegations of Sierra Leone, Togo, Ghana, and Senegal on the prevailing state of affairs in their respective countries. However, the Gambian delegation was dissatisfied with Senegal's report capturing the Trans-Gambia Bridge as one of their local infrastructure projects that has eased movement of people and goods. Honorable Samba Diallo, minority leader and a member of the Gambia delegation, moved a motion for that part of the report to be expunged from Senegal's report. I asked Honorable Diallo why the Gambian delegation felt offended and took the issue so seriously.
We will tell you why they were offended and took it so seriously. Normally, when the ECOWAS Parliament sits, countries come up and they present their situation report. It's usually quite a boring, innocuous thing. These are the things we've done, these are our challenges. But our Senegalese brothers were a bit naughty. The Trans-Gambia Bridge, they put down as one of their projects that they had completed and handed over. Stonebridge, what made them do such a thing?
Remarkable stuff. I wonder how much they said they spent on it. I wonder if these things sort of in the
if they go down into the minutiae.
Into the minutiae. So that's it. So I'm also wondering here, well, let's not forget that in the first place, it has been changed now to Senegambia Bridge. Actually, Senegambia Bridge is the official name.
Yes, quite.
Whether we want to take it or not.
That's right.
I realize that we've been referring to it as Trans-Gambia Bridge.
But the official name is...
We are sulking here. That seems a bit like a sulk there. So let's deal with these things seriously. Yes, as far as I am aware, I mean, the whole of the bridge is within Gambia, really. So
totally.
Trans-Gambia would have been okay. But they've decided to change it. But let's start maybe asking certain questions since they've done this. How much did they really contribute?
Well, indeed.
Now, there are certain details that we do not know about. For them to have the audacity to include it in their report to ECOWAS, maybe we're jumping too quickly. Let us look at the details. Yes. I would really love to know the details.
Because I found it extraordinary that if they had no input in, a kind of financial sense and so on, why they would put it in the report. And if anybody wants, the report is there. And as you said by our colleague there, the Gambians have asked for that bit to be expunged. I don't know whether ECOWAS has agreed, but I guess they're having that verbal fisticuffs now about it being removed. But it seems quite extraordinary that they should. Because unless they felt that it should be in there, you would wonder why they would put it in.
Why would they put it? This is it for me. This is the key question here. I would love to hear their rationale for doing it. How much actually did they contribute, if any?
If any.
What has been going on behind the scenes, as it were, for the reason for this? So we'll have to find out about that as well, really.
And I've tasked our colleague who's in Abuja until the 12th of June, I think it is, the Parliament closes, to actually chase up on this one, perhaps speak to the Senegalese contingent who are there and say, this has been challenged by the Gambians. Can you tell us why you've included it? And who knows, they might be able to give us
absolutely. What have you
perfectly
contributed?
Sensible.
Absolutely, they can give you something perfectly sensible. Because we would like to think the Senegal's got seasoned diplomats, seasoned people running government, and they know what they're doing. So to put something obviously false in your report,
and these are quite comprehensive reports.
That's
they're that thick.
Yes. So it strikes me as really very odd. Very strange that one would put something obviously false in your report.
Sure. It's as Mr. Mboj says there, I find it totally bizarre, and I had to actually read the bit in the report for myself to actually. I thought, really? They did that? But they did. They went there. Anyway, this one, again, another one that we have to follow up on, and we promise we'll keep you informed and posted on what happens with that one. But once again, thank you, Mr. Mboj. Food for thought there. Anyway, on to a next one. Before we come to the next story, let's take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we will have 5 more stories, so don't go away. Stay tuned.
Your favorite mobile service has done it again. Now you can buy cash power with your QMoney account free of charge. Yes, you heard me right. For free. Nothing is cheaper than free. So start buying your cash power from the comfort of your homes with unbeatable services QMoney has to offer. With QMoney, life is easy. Visit your nearest QMoney agent to cash in or call customer care on 133 for more information. Don't forget to wash your hands with soap after handling cash. Stay home, stay clean, stay safe. QMoney, Suñu Kalpe. We innovate, others follow.
the Council of African Descendants, COAD, and Blacksit organized a symposium, Homecomers Symposium. It was kind of based around the transatlantic slave trade, but there was a lot more than that, which was at the core of it. This clip might give you an inkling about what it was all about. Have a look.
A transition where each individual country, collectively as a continent, meeting to know that the diaspora is a place where Africans enslaved were taken to, and they have a right to return. And as the African Union, they must look at each country, their constitutions, all the elements that are essential to agree on a protocol on how to ensure that those who want to return now will be given all the opportunities to be able to do so in any country of their choice.
Mr. Mboj, we've been down this road and this discussion before, and Halifa Sallah there, some passion talking about those who want to be to return to Africa, to any country of their choice. Now, we're not talking about people who in the normal run of things would be termed Africans, but we're talking about people of African descent. And if we can steal from Peter Tosh, no matter where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African. And these are people who want to return. Now, before I ask you the question, what was interesting about that particular gathering, I was there and I spoke at the event. They had about 30 National Assembly members actually supporting their position, saying that we want to help you introduce a private member's bill to actually get this in front of the House. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, that Peter Tosh's line can be really an anthem for Pan-Africanism.
Sure.
That's really what it is. Sure. And Halifa Sallah, well, a self-avowed Pan-Africanist.
Indeed.
I would expect him to do.
Indeed.
Did you know the interesting thing is, most people who understand about Pan-Africanism, or at least know the phrase, if you talk to them, they say, yes, they are Pan-Africanists.
Yeah, yes.
Most people would.
Yes,
so we shouldn't really be debating this at all.
Which is what I said at that thing. Why are we even debating this?
It is a remarkable thing. Yeah. So now it seems the term now just exists as a shell.
Yes, really.
Yes. It's high time we put in the knot, we put in the details, and this is what it means. Absolutely, we should let them come. We all know the historical circumstances. Some countries are doing that.
Doing it already.
That's it. Why private members' bill? Government should be leading this.
Well, this is it. And I challenged some people in a discussion on WhatsApp about this. I said there are people in countries like Rwanda. I know Sierra Leoneans who've gone to Rwanda. Okay, you'll say, okay, that's Africans within Africa, and kind of, move there and settle there. Rwanda is not in ECOWAS, so, the right of settlement is not necessary. But somebody like Kufuor-Addo in Ghana has been welcoming back people and giving them, and yet people, when they think of Pan-Africans, they don't think of him straight away. So I said, some can talk the talk, but, we're talking about it. He's walking the walk.
Absolutely, and
he's doing it. Yeah. Quite.
That's the country of Nkrumah.
Yeah, quite.
Really,
exactly.
Ghana's got to be like the capital, as it were, of Pan-Africanism on the continent.
Yeah, sure.
It has to be Nkrumah. So he's got all that legacy, all that inheritance, that weight. So he acted, in fulfillment, as it were, of that legacy. With us, for a while, roots, the idea of roots, really sort of, in many saw it as working in our favor. Carry the logic through, as it were.
Indeed.
Take ownership of it, as it were. Take it as your inheritance as well. Welcome them back. Roots in the Gambia.
Yeah,
they simply want to return to their roots.
Yeah, quite. And so on a practical level, what you had there was the proposal for a private member's bill. But Suleiman Saho, National Assembly member, who actually moderated the whole thing, he said something, and he wasn't the only one. The president actually has the prerogative to give those people citizenship even now. He doesn't have to wait for a private member's bill. And so they were kind of nudging him by saying, why don't you do it? Why don't you set the example by granting citizenship So why doesn't he do it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So that would be a good question. why doesn't he do it? Absolutely, we would want him to do that.
Sure.
Now for people who want it, why not? As long as we do, are we going to have sort of like security checks? So what's going to happen? So maybe we can work out the modalities, the practicalities, and all the rest of it.
Sure.
But yet it might need a legislative footing.
Yes, indeed, because what, again, we've discussed this before, is that what they're asking for is that they're not saying, if I come today at the airport, I get granted. They said, rather than me having to wait 15 years, can't you make it 2? One person who was there said, why not make it 3? And I thought, you know what, if they were offered 3, I don't think they'd quibble. But 15 is quite a stretch, from 3 to 15. There's quite a gap. And so really that was why they wanted it to be introduced via a private member's bill, and why they've got the sort of support of so many National Assembly members. I mean, not all of them spoke, but on the platform, but from the ones who spoke from the floor, there was not a dissenting voice. They were all there because they were in support, actually. And what I liked about it was they weren't all from Greater Banjul. They were from across the country, and they were saying that actually these folks who are coming back, they don't always want to settle in Banjul or Kanifing or they want to settle across the length and breadth of this country. And I spoke to some of them, I was quite impressed. But is that a fair? Because I have to be honest, with some colleagues, I was horrified to hear them talk about we might be swamped by these people. And I said to them, stop saying these people. It's like saying, my cousin or my brother wants to come back, but I'm not going to let them. That's how we should see them.
And that was exactly my reaction as well. I had a similar conversation, and that was it, that we, us, and them of thing. I said, actually, your assumptions, you got it wrong. Your first statement.
It's not us and them.
That's it, exactly.
It's we.
It's we. So, but I would love to know, what does Barrow think?
Yeah.
I'm not sure we actually know what his position is on this.
They said they'd had a meeting with him, but he had lots of warm words, but nothing concrete. And so that's why they want to kind of nudge, push him, prod him, whatever you want to say, into actually making a statement, a kind of definitive statement, one way or the other.
That's it. And one is also not quite sure what is really the national sentiment. What would be the political risks?
This is it. And I think that has to be taken into account.
That's it. Yeah. So I'm not even sure, but you do hear, you're absolutely correct, in some people they're quite xenophobic, not very welcoming of that idea. They're going to be swamped, and perhaps they know that these people would come with more financial clout,
buy out their land.
So there is that interest, really, that you must help people to allay the fears.
Sure.
There's a way that you must manage.
Because I did concede when I was having a discussion with somebody. I said, yes, it's easy for me to say, because if I wanted to, I have right of settlement here, either as an ECOWAS citizen or the fact that my father was born here. I said, but it's not the same for others. And so it might be easy for me to say, yes, let them come in, but we have to take cognizance of what the sentiments are from people who are indigents, saying, well, actually we don't want, and these are my fears, and they might be legitimate fears.
Absolutely. So that's the political class must just understand it that way, and you manage it. Often you realize that these are really misplaced fears.
Yeah, quite.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's sort of like tilting at windmills, as inventing an enemy that is not there. So, and then you know how to deal with it. You got to engage with the community if you want to introduce something like that, because you have to take people with you.
Of course.
Really, before things you want to do it. But with political will, it will happen.
Sure. Thanks for that. And just to say, in closing on that particular discussion, a lot of the National Assembly members said they were going to do exactly that. They would take it to their communities and discuss it with their electorate and say, this is why we think it's a good thing. So a good sign. Again, thanks for that. And now, if I told you that magistrates were going on a training course, you say, big deal. This one really matters. Why? Have a look.
In the course of the training, there will be discussions on the rules of practice, procedure, and jurisdiction of the revising courts. As we all know, the revising courts, according to the Elections Act, are special courts established by the Honorable Chief Justice on the advice of the Independent Electoral Commission upon the completion of the voter registration to deal with all challenges and objections to the voter registration.
Now, I'm not somebody who is known for betting, but Mr. Mboj, I'm willing to bet these magistrates are going to be really busy this year.
Absolutely. You can tell.
Challenges to the voters register, we've already seen them. We've seen photographs being posted of children who look like they're 10 years old, allegedly being allowed to register, although nobody has shown us the cards of one of these. They just appear to be standing in line. So these magistrates, the training is in the kind of dispute resolution that's going to be around those sorts of challenges. I said they've got their work cut out. What's your sentiment based on what you've seen, heard, and read?
Yes. I mean, this is foresight. You're getting ready. You prepare. Hope for the best and prepare for the worst, as they say.
Indeed.
And absolutely, the way the pieces are sort of setting out. On the board, this could be a very, very, very interesting elections. Sure. Everybody needs to be prepared, even with us. We've been talking about the media. We all need to be prepared how to report these things, how to handle all of these things. So we'll see what happens, but it's a good thing that they're well prepared, because we're going to have lots of those. We're going to dispute. It's going to be disputatious sort of elections.
I mean, as well as the ones about allegations of children voting, pardon me, there seem to be lots of allegations of non-Gambians registering. Not voting, sorry, registering. Lots and lots of those. None of these seem to be founded in anything other than rumor, but you and I know, a rumor wakes up in the morning, and by the time it goes to bed, it's a stone cold fact, because the way people take it and run with it. So a good thing, as you say, for these courts to be set up. And as I said, I'm not a betting man, but I'm willing to bet.
Already the attestations.
Well, indeed.
A lot of people have sort of expressed fears over these attestations, the processes of the alcalos and the CFOs. And we've also recently, wasn't it, there was talk that even the mayor in Banjul had also done this when she doesn't have the authority to do so. There are all sorts of things going on. So there will be I'm glad you mentioned this thing about attestations, because one of the things that I discussed with the people in the office, I said, but this has been around for so long. Why is it now that and what the Independent Electoral Commission have done to try and say that the only ones that they will accept are ones that are filled and stamped on the form that they provide to the alcalos, not one where alcalo writes on a piece of paper and then stamps. Apparently they will not accept those. It has to be on the proper form, a kind of attestation form. Is that going to solve the problem? Well, certainly we need to have some kind of monitoring. Ultimately, it's the IEC that is in charge. Sure. But exactly, you're right with the chiefs and with the CFOs. I was in one of our programs on State of Affairs. I said to one of our guests, but we use alcalos and chiefs in all sorts of official capacity. They are part of local government. They are part of our governance structure. Sure. If you're going to talk about their lack of education, I said, well, that applies in almost everything they do in some form.
Why is it a problem now?
That's it. Yeah. So why not perhaps to help them, give them the process in place that they can follow, in how to authenticate. There are certain ways that you can help that institution to work, as it were. So, I mean, if you want to get rid of it, that's a different argument. We can have that argument. But for now, for this, absolutely.
It exists, how do you make it work?
Yes, we make it work. So the IEC must help them having sort of rational, good, sound processes in place in how to authenticate.
Sure. Good one. And I might test it by trying to get somebody to attest me. And if it works, then we know we're in trouble. If I get rejected, then perhaps we know it's working. So who knows? I'm going to go and give it a go. But now that I've said it, I hope none of the alcalos are watching this program. Now on to something else. there'd been a lot of talk about crime. We saw earlier in this program, we talked about drug seizures by the enforcement agency. There's also been lots and lots of things on social media about taxi drivers and how people are scared of getting into taxis. Probably know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, have a look.
When you take a taxi, you do not know, the person can violate your rights because there is no security in this country. Considering the lack of security, let us be vigilant. Make sure to take a taxi you know, because this is very scary.
Samboj, I chose that one because in a very unscientific straw poll, I mentioned this to particularly some of the female colleagues, and they actually were expressing similar sentiments to the one we just heard there, that now they are reluctant to get into just any old taxi. Something we should be worried about?
I think we should. True, we do not have really the scientific details. We really do not know how serious it is. But recently here, I mean, in the past few years, really, I've been hearing stories. I have to say, I've been hearing lots of stories about taxi drivers, sometimes even to the extent of rape. So raping their passengers, and absolutely, that is true.
Sure.
It has become a common phenomenon now, and you know, be it in isolated areas. Of course, you need the situational circumstances that will also make them do that. So this is what people face. So now people must take more safety measures when they do that. I know some people who would sort of snap the number plate, and send it to a friend, and then they'll go.
And there are ways of defeating this. And our colleague Jennifer Sonko was asking at the end of that particular report, when it was broadcast, should there be a kind of strict licensing system whereby, you know, in London you get into a taxi, the person actually has a badge with their picture and their number on it, and you can look at it, memorize it, or even snap it if you want. They're not going to say no, don't. Should we introduce such a similar thing here?
Absolutely. Even this sort of remember the guilt system. You see, if we really want to control the taxis, or be it plumbers, or be it any of these trades, you know, you can just hire them to come and do stuff for you. Everybody must be part of an association. That's the way you get your control. That's even the way you get your tax. That's how you get standards. That's how you do all sorts. But an open free market, anybody can do or whatever. You are never going to have standards. People have gone through similar stages of development, if one can say it, put it that way, or rather they have faced similar socio-economic, socio-political conditions. This was how they dealt with it. That's just an example. You don't have to follow it, but it sort of brings some kind of sanity into things, particularly a developing nation such as ours. You have to enforce it. I'm sorry. That's why dictatorships tend to work. When they have vision, they tend to work quicker.
Well, this is it. And in London, of course, they have the black cab system where you have to go through a particular process and be licensed. Otherwise, you cannot operate. So perhaps something we need to...
all taxi drivers, you must go really through certain special training to become that before you can get your license. We should start all over from scratch. Everybody. You need to go through a certain process. It may take us, 2-3 years, perhaps more, to clean up the system, but it takes gall to do stuff like that.
Do you know about the knowledge?
Absolutely. Brilliant. They have to cram up
every street name, 6 miles from the center of London, you have to know, and you know how to get there, including avoiding all sort of one-way systems and so on. We need to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's hope that these spate of attacks and violations of people's rights end, because really there are a lot of taxis in the country, and we need to be able to trust them. Thanks for that, Mr. Mboj. Now, Mali, the country of Mali has been a bit of a thorn in the side of ECOWAS. The country's been spiraling from one crisis to the next, or lurching from one crisis to the next. Recently, they tried to stop the members that nominated by Mali from sitting at the ECOWAS Parliament. What happened? Have a look.
The sub-regional parliament, through Speaker Sidi Mohamed Tunis, had in January this year approached the Community Court of Justice for advice on whether the 6 members of the National Transitional Council of Mali elected to represent the country in ECOWAS Parliament should be sworn in as members or not. The Parliament has been waiting for the court's advice before swearing in the Malian delegation to formally admit them to the Parliament. This means that the delegation can now take their oath, but it is not clear when.
Uncertainty continues because I think some of the members, Mr. Mboj, of the Parliament are still objecting, even though the court has cleared them to be sworn in and to take their oath. But before we came in, I had a look at a statement by Assimi Goita, who just wanted to reiterate that I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay in power. This is the coup leader. And he said something that was quite interesting. He said the president I had removed decided to reshuffle the cabinet without discussing it with the vice president. And of course, he was the vice president. He didn't say without discussing it with me. But I said Mali seems to be lurching from one crisis to another. This is just yet the latest. I mean, what can we do about Mali?
Absolutely, and when you look at the existential threats around, that's why everybody is sort of scared. But this is interesting. So when I looked at the story, then I thought to myself, okay, now at the ECOWAS level, what does suspension mean?
Yeah, quite.
Maybe the court, it will be interesting to read the
and I mentioned the court in another discussion and said how people had kind of dismissed it because only 6 people had actually signed up to be bound by its rulings and had nominated, you know, a kind of focal point. Gambia, of course, is one of those that has not. And so it made me think, as it probably made you think, that, well, okay, if not all of us have signed up, does that mean all of us are not bound? And is that why there's uncertainty about whether they will be sworn in?
Absolutely, okay, absolutely. But here, this is what they've said, and we all know, we've talked about it here before. Sort of leaders do not like that sort of thing. You know, having these jurisdictions, as it were, outside of your country, stripped from you, and then you are bound by it. They're really quite reluctant all over the world. They don't like that at all. So this is the issue. So now here we wonder. Now, so yes, when I said, so here, what does suspension mean? Are these people sort of dabbling in politics? They don't want to exacerbate the situation. That was why they wanted the Malians. You know, such political considerations. It's not simply legal. I suspect. I suspect that they've smuggled in. You know how judges can do these things. Do they interpret the law, or do they make it up at all? Do they make the law, or do they just interpret it? They do both. Sure. So is it possibly that sort of thinking, political thinking of reconciliation, you know, trying to keep them on board and let's manage the situation, don't be too harsh, don't be too punitive of them.
Indeed. Well, let's hope it's the latter. Thank you for that. And that takes us nicely onto our next story. I say nicely, it's not a particularly nice story. Things seem to be spiraling out of control in Uganda. Have a look at this, and when we come back, I'll tell you what it's all about.
Mobile phone footage obtained by QTV shows the general with blood on his clothes emerging from the vehicle on a crowded street, standing next to a soldier with a pistol. The minister is then shown being driven away on a motorbike accompanied by armed soldiers. The footage also shows the dead bodies of his daughter and driver with blood seeping onto the road and bullet holes in the vehicle. The general is then shown in what appears to be a clinic or hospital where he gives this message.
All my children, I'll be fine. I've survived. You have lost brain. That's God's plan.
The minister there, Katumba Wamala, saying that is God's plan. Mr. Mboj, this one, we haven't got much time, a couple of minutes or so, but what was interesting about it, I belong to a kind of a Ugandan WhatsApp group, and the discussions in there were quite interesting because people were obviously not defending attempted assassination and the fact that 2 people lost their lives, but not the person that was being targeted. But one of them said, this is what you get when people are exasperated because they think you keep fiddling election results and they think they will never be able to get you out via the ballot box. They resort to desperate measures. Is that what we're seeing in Uganda?
Absolutely. I mean, early on you talked about a country lurching. I think this one is actually spiraling. It's going down. So this is it. When people think that they are not going to get justice, then they resort to other means. This is the key. That's why some would define peace as really the presence of justice, not just the absence of war. You see, that sort of thing. So this is what we're seeing here. And look at it, the poor girl, the daughter.
The daughter.
Caught in the crossfire of politics.
Sure. Yeah.
Remarkable, all the price to pay, just because the president perhaps wants to hang on too long.
Yeah.
So
and in fact, most of the images that were shared of the daughter and her father previously was of her sitting next to him at the latest inauguration of Kaguta Museveni, and so apparently, very close ally of Museveni's, the minister who has survived. It was quite bloody at one point, but as you rightly say, the daughter who, wasn't the intended target.
Absolutely, and the poor driver as well. One wonders the family, what the consequences will be. So it seems as if from now on, Museveni's presence would really deepen this polarization that is emerging now. It's becoming violent. He's got to go at some point. He has to go soon. Well, he has to go soon. I mean, otherwise, things will be quite bad, I feel, in Uganda.
And I think he has to go, and so do we. That brings us to the end of the program, and thank you for watching. I'm Mr. Mboch. Thank you for your insights into the 10 stories that we've covered. And until next week, just remains for me to say thank you for watching and goodbye until the next time. Goodbye.